Thank you very much. The gentlewoman yields back her time. The distinguished gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I would actually argue that last Congress was a very unproductive Congress. We didn't even do oversight last Congress. It was too busy waiting to get your number to go vote by proxy, and the committee hearings, we barely met. So I'll be that as it may. This has been actually a pretty productive Congress. Okay, a couple things. Mr. McKnelly, I would say my district's congressional liaison advised that the COVID-19 vaccine mandate by SSA was a huge factor in the backlog of what's going on in my congressional district. We have a couple of statistics. According to the Code of Federal Regulations, Title Section 20, 404.1642, max processing time should be 49.5 days for Social Security disability insurance. Currently, according to the Florida Division of Disability, it's determined that the average processing time was 225 days, nearly a 200% increase from 77 days in 2019. And so my district has seen this in particular. The staff said that there's currently an average of an 8-year tenure of these workers. They have about a 30 years worth of overall knowledge in the office, but the response times are significantly higher post-pandemic than pre-pandemic. What has been done since the pandemic to build the workforce and ensure quality of service to Americans?
Thank you for the question. We are currently in the process of rebuilding our workforce and increasing staffing levels. Most recently in FY23, an anomaly of close to $800 million resulted in our ability to hire a number of individuals, again, a sum total of 3,000, and that rebuilding of the workforce and those additional personnel will—
Let me ask you this question. How many employees did you lose during the pandemic? Because your processing times basically went up 200%. From pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, I would assume you lost employees. So what happened? How many employees did you lose?
I can't speak to the exact number, but I know that our attrition levels—
Mr. McKnelly, this is an oversight hearing dealing with federal workforce. Obviously, telework is the focus, but you guys just don't even have basic understanding of what your workforces are and what the trajectory of workforce losses pre-pandemic to post-pandemic are?
We do have those numbers, and I can provide those to you for the record.
But why aren't they here now?
All I have available is some general numbers concerning the attrition rates during that particular period in time.
Generally speaking, what were the attrition rates during that particular period of time?
To answer your question, our attrition levels reached historic levels, and it limited our ability to address those growing backlogs.
Define historic. Define historic.
So for many years, the agency averaged 5 to 7% attrition rates, but in FY22, it was 10%, with telephone agents being the highest at about 20%, and then DDS attrition was at about 10% historically, and then that became nearly 18% in FY22. The highest percentage of those DDS workers were the disability examiners, and that was close to 25%.
Why?
I believe that there was some significant challenges with those particular workloads. It's challenging, it's complex, it's very, very hard. And
work is typically hard, Mr. McKnelly. That's why people get paid to do it. Why?
No, like I said, it is a complicated workload, and I think there were difficulties in recruiting and retaining those individuals because of the complexity of the work.
So you said in your call center, your attrition rate was what again for the telephone call workers? What was that?
Telephone agents, about 20%.
20%. Are these telephone agents, were they remote in their own home, or were they in a call center?
Some were in the call center, and then some were also actually working telework as well.
What percentage of the telework employees actually left the profession under Social Security Administration?
The total number?
The percentage of those who were telework, how many of them left? Do you know? How many left?
No, I don't have that answer.
Okay. A couple things. First and foremost, Mr. Pelter, you said earlier that for people who sign up to do telework, that there are codes of conduct and other things in your agency. Everybody attested to that. You said that if people did not comply, there were adverse actions, quote unquote, your words. What are adverse actions?
Thank you, Congressman. An adverse action would be very case-by-case dependent.
What is the response of your agency for somebody who does not comply with the code of conduct for telework?
Congressman, it would depend on the severity of the conduct.
Give me the least severe and the most severe. What are the adverse actions for an employee?
Least severe would be counseling. Most severe would likely be separation from the federal workforce.
What's the processing time for separation from the federal workforce?
I don't have that figure. I'd have to get back to you, sir.
You don't have the figure of what the time is to separate an employee from the federal workforce?
I do not have that figure with me.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that every one of the on this panel should be providing the information to this body about what it actually means to separate an employee from the federal workforce and other adverse actions for employees that do not comply with the code of conduct with respect to telework. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time, but I'd like to engage the gentleman for just a moment. If you could please, Mr. Donalds, make sure that as we